and we're going to begin. And I don't know whether we announced it I don't think we announced it at the meeting last time. But anyway, tonight we're not going to have our announcements before the presentation. They're going to be after the presentation. So I'm going to hand the meeting right now over to Barbara to introduce our guest. And here we go.
Well, welcome everybody. We've got a whopping 36 people here. I'm pretty excited about that. And I'm very excited about introducing our guest speaker to you tonight. Her name is Diana Faris. And Diana is a account manager with Amaco Brent. And one of the jobs or the hats that she wears in that capacity is the Outreach Educational Coordinator. She herself has an MFA in ceramics from the University of Florida in Gainesville. And she's also had work experience at the fabrication studio, or she was a fabrication studio director at the historic Parawalo. Is that right? Parawalo?
Pewabic Pottery.
Okay, wow, I can't see. In Detroit, Michigan. She is in Indianapolis, so she graciously agreed to, 3 hours ahead of us, present this program for us. So I'm very grateful about that. During the course of the presentation, I'd ask you all to make sure that your audio is on mute, please. And if you'll use the chat button, can everybody see the chat button at the bottom of their screen? If you have questions during the course of the presentation or following the presentation, please put your questions there. Once Diana's finished, we'll go through the questions that have come up, and we'll start with Ray's question about what glazes work and hold at cone pen firing. All right. So with that said, Diana is going to talk to us about underglazes, their applications, and she's going to share with us what she knows. So take it away, Diana.
Awesome. Thank you, Barbara, and thank you for inviting me. And thank you all for joining us this evening. Yeah, it's evening there too. Yeah. So I'm just going to jump right in because there's quite a bit to cover, and I want to give you all a chance to ask questions. And I'm going to give you an overview today of the different types of underglazes that Amaco makes and offers. So as we were chatting a little bit earlier, some of you mentioned having used our velvet underglazes, and those are probably our best known line. So I'm going to also tell you about some other kinds and some that are not necessarily liquid underglazes. So in a little bit, I'll show you how this piece here was made. And it was decorated using the semi-moist underglazes that you can see behind me here on the side. So, and so do you all see the underglaze pencils now? Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. So many of you might have used the underglaze pencils for marking textiles, and that's the most common use of the pencils. We actually offer them in 6 different colors. So there's the black that's the most widely used, and then green, blue, brown, pink, and yellow. And some of them go up to cone 10, including the black. I believe the green and the blue do as well. And on this piece here by Tom Munich, you can see how they can be used for drawing as well, and not just for marking textiles or marking names. So I watched an artist demo with them one time, and I'm sorry, sounds like somebody's not on mute that is making a little bit of background noise. Might want to catch that. Thank you. Yeah. So I watched an artist demonstrate with these one time, and it was really eye-opening because he used them. He actually sharpened both ends of the pencil and had a whole bunch of them, even though he was only using black. and he wanted to use them with a different line weight. So any of you that draw might understand the point of that, pun intended, actually. So that sometimes he would have a softer tip, so a wider point, and then other times he'd have the sharp point without having to stop and resharpen and adjust the pencil. So these can be used in conjunction with the other underglaze pencils as well. And the best time to apply these would be on already bisque-fired clay, because you have to press a fair amount and rely on the hardness of the material that you're drawing into for the mark to be made. And so this is one of my favorite examples of that in use. Here are some underglazed chalk crayons. We call them chalks, but of course they are made of the same materials or the same ingredients as other underglazes. They're pretty concentrated, and they come in two different assortments. So we offer them in these two sets. This one shows the colors right up here, and then there's another one that I don't have a picture of, but I can show you on the website if you want to see. So I like these for use with the younger kids, if any of you are working with children, because as opposed to the pencil, they can't break the tip and they don't need sharpening. So they can be used, with every last crumb or bit can be used. The other thing that these are good for, which is just the effect that you see. Let's look at this champagne or wine glass here. It's not the same look as applying a liquid underglaze. It's a different effect. So again, for people that like to draw, this is a good material, and it can be used with the pencils on top or in conjunction with it to get the fine lines. The chalks can be blended together so they can be smoothed either with the finger or with a brush that has water on it, and they can be applied on top of other colors for an accent, like the underglaze colors. And the example on the right here with the dancers was done a little unconventionally. So the one on the left here was drawn directly on a bisque tile, and the one on the right was actually applied on top of unfired white glaze in order not to have to put a glaze on top. And we put it on top of a satin white glaze that was unfired. And it's a little deceiving because there's red clay here, but the white glaze was applied on top of it. And then the colors after the white glaze was applied 2 to 3 coats and allowed to dry, the chalks were applied on top. So I'm going to go ahead and show you this video, and I'm going to mute it because it's just got music. But I can see you, Barbara, if you want to give me a thumbs up that you can see the video. Thank you. So it's a short video, but it goes through, yeah, it's less than 3 minutes long, but it's a great demonstration. And this is one of many videos that are on the Amaco YouTube channel. So this is being drawn on top of the unfired clay, which is an unusual way of using it. But again, it saves having to put a glaze on top and potentially smearing it. So that's one of the things with the chalks and the pencils that's a little bit tricky, is making sure that any glaze that's applied on top doesn't smear the lines and the powders. So if you have access to a spray booth for a clear glaze, that's a good way of applying it on top without smudging it. Sometimes people re-bisque the pieces. They'll apply, do a second firing, a second bisque firing, and then come in and spray the glaze or brush the glaze on top of that. And if I don't have an access to a spray booth, I'll use a sponge and lightly dab a thin coat of clear before brushing on the rest of the coats. So you can see we're building up color, and some of them are smeared and some of them are not, and then coming in with a fine line, alternating between the underglaze pencil and the chalk to create that.
Are you eat these peanuts? I would have eventually, but
Can we make sure everyone is on mute, please?
That's amazing.
It is pretty cool. Of course, the filming is sped up for the drawing. So I think I mentioned you would want to apply this on this square, and usually we would, and we don't want to do that one. I'm going to go back to the presentation. Normally we would apply it directly on the bisqueware, and this is an alternative way of applying it on top of the unfired glaze. So these are the underglaze pencils and the chalks. The next kind that I want to talk about are these semi-moist underglazes, and these are we call them watercolors. They're not really watercolor paints, but we often call them that because they're used and applied in a similar fashion to watercolors, and they're also available or sold in these pan sets. So I'm pointing at one of 4 assortments that we package. And so they look like those undercolor sets that little kids use, where you just dip your brush in water and then apply it, put the brush on the paint and lift it to apply the color. So these are also less commonly used, but some of the artists that use them, I really love the amount of detail that they can get with them, because they are highly saturated, so you get some fine lines, and they also allow for that wash of color that you can see here where I'm pointing with my mouse. I work a lot with art teachers, and I recommend these also for their younger students because there's very little waste and very little contamination. So whereas some of the younger students might spill or double dip a brush or, you know, waste a lot with the cleanup, these are not spilled or wasted in that fashion. So these are, some of the colors are stable up to higher tones, but these are a little trickier. You have to do your own testing. They're not, we haven't created packaging that really necessarily shows how to use them. They're developed for low fire. And I'm going to show you, I don't want to switch too much between the videos and the pictures, but this is a brand new video that we created from one of our live streams. And of course, it's not loading, doesn't want to be seen. So this one's a longer one. It's a 30-minute video. So I'm not going to show you the whole thing, but you can see how some of the sets, so these are 3 of them that are visible in the picture, are just lined up one next to the other to have all the colors available to paint with. And this is a demonstration by Kara, who also does that platter, the jungle platter that I'll show you here in a few minutes. And one of the tips that she talks about in this demonstration is how to wet the colors before applying them or before using them. So I've seen other artists that use them do that as well. They may just use a paintbrush and put water on the colors to soften them so that they're easier to pick up the color getting started that day, or use a little squirt bottle and just drip on each one because getting them started is a little, it just takes a while to get the color to move. But so if you just wet them to start out with, that makes the color lift more easily. And you can see you can build from washes of color to more detail. So I'm not going to show you the whole video, but I did want to show it to you so you know what to look for. And back to the PowerPoint here. And here's the piece that I was mentioning that Kara did. And in this one, she also builds the layers of color. I will show you how this was painted because it's sped up, and it will, it's not very lengthy, and I'm sure you'll enjoy seeing how it's created. So the semi-moist are recommended for application on bisque as well, especially because there's so much water on the brush, you don't want to pick up the moist clay or the greenware. But in this particular example, she did a similar thing to what we did with those chalks, which is she applied a low fire satin matte white glaze, 2 to 3 coats, let it dry, and then painted into it like Maiolica decorating or Majolica decorating. So this is an alternative use of the material, and it's also a good material to do Maiolica with because it doesn't have as much clay in it as some of the liquid underglazes. So I am going to play you this video because it's less than 2 minutes, and I will talk a little bit. So at this point, she's sketching the design on top of the unfired glaze, of course, with a regular pencil, a graphite pencil that'll burn out. And then she's just painting layers of color, working all over the surface. And you can see it's a different effect than if you're trying to apply the liquid underglazes, where you usually get a more opaque look. And sometimes, yeah. Sometimes people will, sorry, I'm getting distracted. Do you think, Barbara, that you can mute as the moderator, maybe mute the. Great.
Whoever the host is can mute everybody.
Yeah. So anyway, we're building the layers of color, and sometimes people ask me, how many coats should I apply? How many coats of the semi-moist do I need to apply? Well, it's not a matter of how many do you need to apply, it's how many you want to apply to get the effect that you desire. And it's more about building up layers of color, and the more there is on the brush and the more they are layered on top of each other, the more opaque it gets. So if you want to wash, it will be a wash. And if you want it layered, it will, if you want it opaque, you can add layers on top. Sorry, I'm not good at, I'm easily distracted when there's another voice, so I'll try to focus more here. So at some point in that video, I don't know if you noticed, the colors got brighter, and that's when she actually did a firing in between to see how it turned out, and then decided to go back into it and paint some more. I love this piece, and I just love this picture, so that's why I use it on the cover. So we call the semi-moist underglazes, I don't know if you notice, or if I put it here, SMUGs, S-M-U-G, semi-moist underglaze, if you hear anybody say that, or if I refer to that. So here's another artist named Hisu Lee that is using them to achieve that fine level of detail or high level of detail that I mentioned. And she's also using them in conjunction with the liquid velvet underglazes. And so by using a very fine brush and really working it into the surface of that underglaze, it can create those fine, intense lines. And I just saw one of the questions, so I am going to answer that since I'm talking about, can you paint over white or clear glaze with the velvets as well? You can, but velvets have more clay in them, so they're more likely to create a matte surface. So you want to check and test at the firing range that you're using and with this particular glaze that you're using. But I know that some people use them successfully for Maiolica decorating as well. And here's another piece, artist works. Some of these are images that I've taken or borrowed from our Instagram artists' postings, because it's lovely to see some of how these pieces are being used. And this artist, you can see, is using just a very fine wash over the white of the clay. and not necessarily covering the whole surface, and still utilizing the white clay like you would watercolor paper, and seeing that translucency of the underglaze through it. Okay, so I covered the 3 alternative underglaze types, the pencil, the chalks, and the semi-moist underglazes. And now I'm going to start talking about the liquid underglazes, which is, of course, what most of us are familiar with. And within the underglaze series that Amaco offer, we actually have 2 kinds. The velvet underglazes, so the ones with the green labels, as you can see here on the left and the middle, and then the LUG series that has kind of a purple label that we also call LUG because it stands for liquid underglaze. And I'm just going to answer it now. A lot of people ask, you know, what's the difference? Some people might have used one or the other, and when they find out about the other kind, they want to know what the difference is. Basically, the short answer is not a lot. They came from different formulas over the years, and we just ended up with 2 very successful, strong, popular lines. So we haven't gotten rid of one, basically, but there are other differences. So when I say not a lot, is much of what I will show you about how to use them, how to apply them, why you might choose to use an underglaze is similar. The differences come when we talk about firing range. So with the velvets, they have a wider firing range, more colors are stable up to cone 10 than from the LUG line. And with the velvets, they have a nicer velvety finish if they're left unglazed. So if you're doing sculptural work or decorative work that you don't want to have a glaze on top of the velvets would be your choice. And then the other difference is that for the most part, the velvets have higher concentration of color, higher pigment intensity, so that you can basically get away with less color and get more intense color options. So those are the major differences, those 3. And then lastly, there are more colors to choose from the velvet underglaze lines. So the LUGs have only 24 colors, whereas the velvets have around 60 at this point. So I will focus the next part of the presentation specifically telling you about the velvet underglazes, but most of what we will look at and talk about can be done with the LUG line as well. So here's what they look like unglazed. This was the cover of one of our glaze catalogs a couple years ago, where a group of us got together and sculpted hands, and then each one represents one of the colors. That was kind of a fun project. So there are, as I said, close to 60 colors to choose from. I used to know exactly, but we removed a few of the slower moving lines. We've added colors, we've added some new colors, and so I think almost 60 is a good number. And these are all available in the little 2-ounce jars and pints. And some of the most popular colors are also available in gallons. And as I mentioned, you can use them with or without a clear glaze. And that's part of what we're showing you on this board over here. So the matte part, or the less, not only is it less shiny, but it's also usually not as dark, is the area that has no clear on top. And then the glossy, darker area, I'm pointing here at the green, has a clear gloss glaze on top. But I'm going to show you different ways of using them, and we'll look at some examples, I believe, without the glaze as well as with. And then lastly, we'll show you using them under other glazes that are tinted glazes and not necessarily a clear transparent. And as I mentioned, we have a wide firing range from cone 05 to 10. For each of those firing ranges, we'll have examples. Like if you go in a retail store, you'll see boards that say 05, one that will say 5, one that will say 10. on our website, I'll show you how to find that information, because even though we're saying they have a wide firing range, the colors may change. So they don't all always look the same at those firing ranges. So I just love this little video that gives you an overview of velvet underglazes. So I'm going to show you this one right here. And this is just a minute long. And again, this is from Amaco's YouTube channel. And this is kind of an overview of a lot of the things that you can use the velvet underglazes for. And we'll be looking at some examples after this presentation. So of course, you can paint them on. Colors can be blended together. You can do sgraffito, where you're carving through the underglaze to reveal the clay, which of course you would do at the leather hard stage. Spraying, screen printing, and then staining the surface, or like an antique technique that you would do at bisque. And here's more sgraffito. So I have to remember to cancel, because they now have it set up where it just goes straight into the next video. All right, so that was just a quick overview of some of the many things that you can do with the underglazes. And then here are the newest colors. So I just dropped these in today. The colors here next to new 2020, there are 2 shades of pink. And to answer that question from earlier about the colors, whether pinks and purples would change up to higher cones, well, some of them do and some of them don't. That's part of why we've released these new colors that you see here. So the coral and the blush are 2 pinks that are stable up to cone 10, and same with pretty much everything on this page. So the newer colors that we've released are ones that we have intentionally developed to have the wider firing range, whereas some of the ones that we discontinued were ones that used to change significantly or not work at the higher cones. So since we've realized that so many of our customers and end users are using them at the higher cones. So I'm going to hold these up. I know that you probably won't see them real well, but this is to help remember later on, because I have the live chips here. And even though they look similar at low fire, so the bigger chips are at low fire, the middle ones at mid-range, whoops, here I go, and this is at cone 10. You can see by looking at the 2 greens why we have the 2, because this one is actually quite a bit darker at cone 10. So same with the colors that were released recently, more recently in 2021. So we have the different shades of gray that are also go up to cone 10. The grays that we used to make used to either turn blue or fade at cone 10. So we created these that are going to be more reliable at that firing range. Same with the ultra white and the ultra black and the ultraviolet. So that's where those names came from. And so as I was just pointing on my board, I can point a little bit more easily. We're showing you the 3 chips per color to show you the 3 firing ranges. So the middle one is cone 5 mid-range. The largest chip is 05, what most of the colors were originally developed for, and the smaller chip is cone 10. So unlike when I first started working with underglazes and clay back in the late 80s, I guess it was, you know, we can get a stable red at cone 10. And we've got these cadmium encapsulated stains that make it possible to get all these shades of orange and red. And that's part of why some people choose to use the underglazes, to get that vibrant color. Then other reasons people choose to use the underglaze is for this level of control that you would get with painterly details. So These are a couple of artist examples that are from my favorites. Deb Weinstein's vessels here on the right, she's a South Florida artist, and these are like coral reef images, but look at that control and painterly detail. That would be quite challenging to achieve using glazes, and also the satin surface. So she's leaving them unglazed so that you can still see that effect. If you look at this piece closely, you can also see that she utilized blending of color. So the yellow, where I'm pointing my cursor, was blended in with this kind of orangey red, and created shades of orange in between. And I saw her do a demo one time. She actually blends it on the piece, but you could also blend on a palette and apply it on to the piece. And then she layered additional colors on top. And remember, underglazes, especially the liquid ones, are going to be opaque if they are layered thick enough. So she layered, say, green, and I can't tell from here if it's blue or navy blue or black on top. But so it's that level of control and detail that you can achieve. In Tim Ludwig's piece here on the left, he's blending them as well and doing shading and all that, and painting an image, you know, a still life essentially. That would also be tricky or difficult to achieve using glazes. One thing I love about his picture is just how he juxtaposes this very delicate, I want to almost say a feminine imagery on a very masculine throne picture. I just love that. So now I'm showing you different ways that you can use liquid underglazes and why you might want to choose to use them. So in Nikki Nietzak's piece here, you might think, oh, I could also do that with a semi-moist underglazes. And I hope you thought that, because that means that you are also learning to spot these things. So let's say she didn't have them on hand, or she prefers to just have the liquid underglazes in her studio. She can apply them thinly. She can dab a little bit of the liquid underglaze on a palette and add water and mix into it and achieve that watercolor wash effect. So it's possible to get similar effects using one or the other. It's just what's the majority of the effect that you want, or what technique are you usually going to go to with the work. And so remember, if you're thinning down, don't thin down the whole jar. It's better to just thin what you're going to apply to the piece. So I always use a palette, or, you know, like a paper plate or something as my mixing palette, and just thin it down there before applying it. And we just don't want to thin down everything in the jar in case we want to use it more solid or more thick later on. And also, unnecessary addition of water can also make the underglaze or glaze separate in the container, because it changes the chemistry. So here are some velvet underglazes applied on sculptural surfaces. So remember when I said you don't always have to put a clear glaze or a gloss glaze on top? These are examples where you might want to leave it matte on purpose and not have that shiny effect. And let me go back and say that if you're making dinnerware or something that you want to be food safe, it does need to have a glaze that seals the surface and prevents it from absorbing food and growing bacteria. So Trent's piece on the right is a combination of some sgraffito and painterly application. Melissa Cadell's sculpture on the right just has a little bit of color around the lips and on the figure, and she uses it in that staining technique that the short video that I showed you. So where it's bisque fired and then applied and then wiped off, so it goes into the crevices and adds detail. Of course, the lips look like they were painted on. And Travis Winters, if any of you have visited our demonstrations at NCCA conferences in the past, you might have seen him. He is very entertaining and very irreverent with his use of materials. And in this piece here, if I can follow the chain correctly, I'm pointing on the example on the top left. So this is in clay form, of course, in moist form. And I believe on the right, this has been bisque fired and has one solid coat of velvet underglaze on each piece. And then he builds up the layers of color. And he also, looking here on the bottom right, he dilutes the underglazes and drizzles them on, and then he uses actual powdered stains and sprinkles them on top to kind of like get all these different crazy effects. And sorry, sometimes I get a chance to peek at the questions. What underglaze did Tim Ludwig use on the red clay? The white he used, I believe, was his homemade slip, the white to cover the terracotta, but you could use any of the white Amaco underglazes, and he used the velvet underglazes to paint on top of that. Inlay, also known as Mishima, and Sean O'Connell, this is a difficult piece to explain, and I was present for one of his demonstrations one time, and unfortunately I was a little distracted. I didn't watch the whole thing, but this is an incise line where I'm pointing here with my cursor. And so the incision is done at the leather hard stage, and then the underglaze can be applied either then and wiped off for the inlay technique for Mishima. You could also bisque fire it and apply the black underglaze afterwards. The halo is happening because of his clear glaze moving. So if you have a super stable clear glaze that doesn't flow, you're not going to get that halo. You would need a glaze that's going to flow. And because black underglaze usually has cobalt in it, it's making a blue pattern. So this is, you know, something that may have started as an accident or a mistake that turned into a learning opportunity that he figured out how to control and get that effect. And in case I forget to mention it later, when I take you back to the Amaco YouTube channel, I want to point out a recent video that was added about which clear glaze to use for what, because we offer a variety of different glazes. So there's a nice little tutorial about what the different kinds are and which ones you might want to use for what effect. Sgraffito, I know I've mentioned this term a couple times, and I just want to make sure that I explain it. So sgraffito comes from an Italian word, and it's the technique of carving into the underglaze or a slip. So of course, an underglaze is a colored slip. So it's applied on the clay when it's still moist. So either, you know, it could be freshly thrown or it could be leather hard. And the underglaze is allowed to dry to the touch, and then it's carved through to create the design lines, the drawings, and it also creates contrast by revealing the color of the clay underneath. So what I love about Sue Tyrell's examples here is it's like sgraffito on steroids, you know. It never occurred to me before to use multiple colors of the underglaze before doing sgraffito, or, you know, maybe it did, but I never thought of it this way, to have a variety of colors and then come back into them and carve into them. So this just opens up a lot of ideas and possibilities. And, you know, just a simple black outline to draw or write things. So we're calling it graphic detailing here. Some of you might have seen some of Molly Hatch's work. She does some pretty sophisticated kind of production wear with the help of some manufacturing facilities. So you can just use a black fine brush and paint. You could draw with the black underglaze pencil. You could put it in an applicator bottle and draw with it just to get some simple lines. But again, this would be tricky to do with just using a glaze. So these are all reasons I'm kind of I keep saying that because sometimes I saw I got muted. Can you hear me now? Yeah. I guess that's one way to tell me to speed up. So I keep mentioning that like these are reasons to use underglazes because I often have people ask if they've never used them before, why would you use it? You know, why would I use it? Why should I try it? And also, I sometimes run into people at conferences or workshops that are using underglazes, but they're applying the same color on the whole entire surface of the piece and putting a glaze on top. And I'm not sure why they're using the underglaze because it would be easier and more cost effective to just use a colored glaze. So I'm pointing out all these examples to show you ideas or reasons to use underglaze. Don Reynolds is a lovely artist and demonstrator that I got to meet and work with at a workshop one time. And he teaches in New York at the Clay Art Center studio out there. And you should look up his videos as well. His technique is pretty unique. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with Pisanski Easter egg coloring. It's Polish technique. So when he showed me, when I watched his process, that's what it reminded me of, because just like the Pisanski technique, he's using wax resist and building layers of color, one on top of the other, and masking off the underglaze with wax before applying the next color. And that's how the Easter eggs are decorated. You start out with the wax and you put it wherever you don't want the color to mask off. So let me explain this. And I sometimes, even though I've done this before, I get it a little backwards. So I'm pointing here at this cup because it's a little easier than the ones with the complex triangles here. But the first thing he does is he does with a paintbrush, he'll put, and he does this on greenware. So when the clay is bone dry, that's when he likes to decorate, because he's also going to be burning off the wax before applying the glaze, so that he doesn't want to have to do an extra firing. So when the pieces are bone dry, he'll come in with a paintbrush and put like the squiggles. If you can see, the interior has white, so he's using a white clay body. So wherever the white is, he painted. And then on a banding wheel, he bands this rim and this line here with the wax resist. When the wax resist is dry, he applies the black. So the black underglaze went here on the band and on the entire interior of this cup. And then he didn't need to do any more waxing. Over on the bottom half, or the most of the outside of the cup, he brushed on yellow. Whoops, I clicked on the yellow for emphasis. So he applied yellow. When the yellow was dry, he came in with a little sponge that he made, that's a triangular sponge, and dabbed it on every little spot here that he wanted to stay yellow, and covered this entire surface. Yes, a little obsessive, but I love it. And then let that dry. And when the wax was dry, he came back over it with a brush and painted the red. So that's the process that he chooses. It's not an easy process. I followed along in that workshop, and it takes quite a bit of finesse. And then after the bisque firing, you still have to scrape off whatever underglaze tried to stick on top of the wax before being able to apply the glazes. But he does it beautifully, and it works really nicely for him. And by the way, he fires these to cone 6, and he likes to use the Amaco HF9 clear, zinc-free clear. And he does not, on these pieces anyway, and the ones over here, he only went down to this line with the clear glaze over where the clay was undecorated. And then the colored parts, here as well are just the underglaze. And because he went up to cone 6 and the clay vitrified and the underglazes started to melt a little bit, and it's not the surface that comes in contact with food, so it's fine for food safety. All right, and here's another example by Kara. Kara works in our marketing department, and she's also obviously a clay artist. And so remember I mentioned the inlay or the Mishima technique. This is kind of a more complex way of looking at Mishima. So normally most of us would say have the clay color when it's leather hard, carve these lines, and then apply the underglaze that's turquoise here into it. When it's dry enough, either wipe or scrape off what's on the surface, and then you end up with the turquoise and say the white or whatever the color of the clay. But this takes it a step further. So before even doing the Mishima, she applied underglaze to the whole surface of the plate and blended the colors from red to yellow. So that was done first, and then did the carving. So I'm going to show you this quick video as well, because, and you'll probably want to go back and watch this later because it happens fast. And again, I have the audio off, so. So she's doing it on the leather hard clay in order to be able to carve through it. And this is how she's blending the colors, the orange and the red and the orange. So this is the wax resist, and the wax is colored turquoise. So this is a little confusing because when the wax is dry, she's doing the carving for the inlay. So this could be sgraffito and be done with. But then she comes in with the turquoise underglaze. I said the confusing part is because the underglaze is the same color as the wax, but they're two different products. And so that inlays the underglaze into those recesses. And then when that dries a little bit, she wipes it off, whatever beat it up. And this was also fired to mid-range with that I believe she used the Amaco Celadon Clear Glaze on top. Okay, so back to this video. So I love this example again because it just takes it a step further than the simple technique. So some more things that you can do with the underglazes, you can silk screen with them, and artist Jason Burnett is known for a lot of different printing techniques on clay, and he's published at least one book showing his techniques and other artists. So he creates silk screens and then screens the imagery on the clay in the slab form, I believe, before forming them. I could be wrong. These may have been done after they're curved. So we have some techniques that are maybe not as sophisticated as his that are also on our YouTube channel that we've developed for teaching simple silk screen techniques and image transfer techniques. And the artist Kathy Skaggs is a consultant that works with Amaco, and she develops most of our educational content for schools, for teachers. And so this is a lesson plan that's on the Amaco website called Positive Negative. So she shows us how to make these stamps with craft foam that you can buy at a craft supply store. And one side, one plane is the positive and the other side is the negative. So then she used them to print black underglaze onto the white porcelain clay in this case, and use the Celadon colors on top. So I know that it's a lot of stuff, but if you just want to get started with some simple image transfer printing techniques, shoot me an email and I'll be happy to point you to some of these projects that are a starting point. without getting into the sophisticated silk screening. But Kathy and I have started doing these weekly live streams on Facebook that are incorporating some of these other techniques. And she just did one last week on, actually, is it last week or is it the one tomorrow, this Wednesday, using organza to create simple silk screens. And these will all be posted to the YouTube channel in a few weeks. But again, if you're interested in that, I can direct you on where to find those on Facebook, because that's where they're being done and then saved and uploaded later on. So another thing aside from the printing, I want to kind of go back and talk about the fact that instead of just using a clear transparent here, she used these tinted Celadon glazes that are also transparent, but instead of it just being a boring clear, you're seeing the color of that glaze over the white clay and still seeing the black where it's underneath, because of course the black is dominant. So that takes you to thinking about, oh, okay, I guess I don't always need to use a clear transparent glaze on top. So if any of you are doing low fire, here is a line that we recommend and love the effects of using over the velvet underglazes. These are the Opalescence glazes that are low fire, and this is an example I had made using the Bluebell, which is this kind of turquoise blue color, but where it goes over the black underglaze, it starts to bleed and create different shades of blue. And on this piece, we used Bluebell on top of a brown underglaze and got these cool effects. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with this layering tab from the Amaco website, but this is a place where you can look up combinations of using different products over each other. And this is an example of the opalescence like I was just talking about. So here is the light green from the Velvet series without clear glaze, with just clear gloss glaze. And then instead on this example here, we use the transparent pearl, which gives it that kind of milky effect. So instead of it just being looking like this part with a regular clear, it has this effect. And same with these examples here. I know this looks like it's cut, but it's a red underglaze applied on a textured piece. And then I believe it's Bluebell again on top. And the Bluebell breaks. So wherever it's breaking, you know, where it's thin, you see what's underneath it, which is that red color. So it's just a whole other cool effect. So as I mentioned, the opalescence or low fire, you can do something similar with the Celadons, like the example I showed you about from Kathy. They're a little more predictable, the Celadons, than these opalescence that do some crazy things. So anyway, this layering tab, if I have time, I'll show you how to get to it. But just from the Amaco.com site, you go up to resources, and there's a drop-down arrow here. And you can do, there's a layering tab. So you can plug in which series and colors you want to see what they look like, and you'll get combinations pop up. Of course, we don't have everything under the sun possible, but there's more and more added, and people can upload their own examples. So I encourage you to send us your examples. You can just upload them right there on the site, and they'll be part of our part of the resource section. I'm getting close to the end here. I want to make sure that we have time for questions and answers. So I have this page. I'm going to talk about it for a minute, show you what some of these resources look like, and then I'll put it up as we go through some of the questions and answers. So I know I covered a lot, and of course I didn't put my email right there, but I can, I know Barbara has it, and I will quickly drop it into the chat just in case I don't get a chance to answer your questions, everyone's questions today. But I also urge you to reach out to our tech support team. We have a couple of potters on staff that their job is to help everybody with any question that comes through about our products. And most of the time they're happy to answer, even if it's not specifically completely related to Amaco products. So if somebody has a firing question or a clay question. So tech support number, direct number to go to them. That's what they do. They answer the phone all day, every day, and answer emails. The Amaco website where you can find most of the videos that I showed you, you can find them there or on the YouTube channel, but also other examples of the work and the layering tab that I mentioned. And you could subscribe to the newsletter from here, from amaco.com, and learn about what new products are being released or certain videos that have just been released. And then these are some Facebook groups. And the K-12 clay community is where we're doing the live stream that I mentioned. Kathy's got the screen printing demo coming up. So you're welcome to join that group. The Amaco Cone 5/6 Exchange, some of you might already be members, has tons and tons of information, and also that which clear glaze should I use is posted in this group. And we also have a low fire glaze exchange. So there's something for everyone. And feel free to friend me on Facebook. And in addition to these, we've got, of course, all the other social media. And oh, this is from the Amaco.com website. So you can find that Mishima video that I showed you here, and lots of other techniques and project ideas. Here's a screenshot of the YouTube channel. So of course the videos that I showed you are all housed here, and there are many, many more, including some about kiln firing and just basically about how to brush on a glaze, and some tips, top 5 glazing tips, and recycling clay, and how to use Amaco dipping glazes. So all these are here on the Amaco Brent YouTube channel. And this is a screenshot from the low fire group. And this is from the Amaco Cone 5/6 mid-range group. And I pulled this today because I wanted to show you where to find this video if you would like to look for it here as opposed to the YouTube channel. So this is the one about which clear glaze to use. So that talks about the different types of clear glazes at mid-range at Cone 5/6. And then this is the group with our videos on the different printing techniques. So we've got a lot going on. And this is my final slide before the putting the resources back up. And just a reminder for me to tell you just a little bit about Amaco, since I didn't do that. We're based here in Indianapolis, where we manufacture the Brent pottery wheels, of course, all the Amaco glazes, Excel kilns, and these are our silos that we use for manufacturing clay. So each one of those silos has a raw material in it. So most of our clay is sold through education, but we do also make some mid-range and 1 cone 10 stoneware. And we have about 150 employees, and here's a group shot, and I am right around there. And we celebrated 100 years in business the year before last now, 2019. And it's a family-owned, we're a 3rd generation run company. And here are the resources if you want to look at them while I'm looking through the chat. And if we have time after I answer questions, I'll be happy to show you whatever it was that I promised. Oh, how to find stuff on the website, but it's not that hard. I showed you how to find those. So Barbara, do you want me to skim through the questions, or?
Well, I was going to say the first question I think is at 7:15.
Okay, and I believe I I answered the one about the that we were asked beforehand. I'm sorry, I don't remember his name, but that asked about the different colors, the stability of the pinks and purples. Is that good?
Yeah, content. Isn't there a
Yeah.
Amaco have a chart too that shows?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Shall I leave these resources up here for a minute longer? I'll leave them up for a few minutes. Yeah. So just like the chart that I held up, we have these are charts for all the colors. So this shows just the new colors of the velvets, the newest ones. But your retail stores will have the full selection. And of course, they're on the website and they are in our print materials. Not that most of us have access to those these days. We're not doing conferences, but normally we pass them out at conferences. So let me look.
Yeah, the first question is for watercolor underglazes. How many coats are recommended?
Remember I said, and maybe this was typed before I mentioned this, but when I was saying people ask, how many coats should I put on? It's really what effect you want. So if you want that kind of watercolor, watery effect of translucency, then one thin wash. And if you want bold color, solid, opaque, then you build up the layers. And that also means using less water and more underglaze on the brush. So it's all about controlling how see-through you want it to be or how opaque you want it to be. Keep in mind, you do need to put on a little bit more than you think you do. So before the firing, it may look a little bit more intense than after the firing.
Okay, and the next question, can you paint over white or clear glaze with the velvets as well?
Yes, you can do the in-glaze decorating with the velvets on top of another glaze, although because of the clay content in the liquid underglazes, they can sometimes create a matte surface, which may not be desirable and may also affect the food safety. But it depends also on the firing range that you're doing. At low fire, I believe it works a little bit better.
It's less than velour or jet at cone 5. Both
Yeah.
velour and jet flux and cause my lids to stick.
Yeah, I believe that's one of the reasons it was developed. Yeah, yeah. Because the other colors, I mean, all the other colors were originally developed for cone 05. And it's just artists started using them at higher cones, and most of them, or some of them work. So this is why we released the Ultra series, so that they resolve some of the challenges that people were having with them at the higher range.
Okay.
I talked about Tim Ludwig's.
Right. Then using the sprays a bit too. Can you talk?
Yeah. So good. Somebody's familiar with Don's work. So the velvet, the sprays are the velvet underglaze sprays that are our newest series or newest line. So there are 8 colors of velvet underglazes that have been packaged in aerosol cans, so that if you don't have access to a spray booth or want that immediacy of the effect, you can use them in the spray can. They're still not widely available. They were only released as a test market. So there is a particular link that I had saved. Oh yeah, I need to exit my presentation to get to it. If anybody's interested in that, can you see my screen? Velvet sprays. Barbara?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. I pulled them up because I have to go to an email to find that link. So here is the link to the velvet sprays if you want to pull that up and read about them some more. So they're not sold through distributors yet, but we're working on that, on making them more widely available. We wanted to kind of make sure that everything was working really well with them before they got on shelves, distributor shelves. So yeah, those can be applied at all the different stages of the liquid underglazes and create that spray effect. I love it. Somebody's asking about rehydrating glazes. Thank you. That's something I always like to talk about because we understand that, you know, we all have colors that we don't use as often and then they get thick or dried out. So whatever description I'm saying now for rehydrating, you can use the same for Amaco glazes, liquid brushing glazes, or Amaco liquid underglazes, which is we do recommend using distilled water when you're thinning them down, because it basically limits any additional variables that might happen. So sometimes people are on well water or have particularly hard water that can create different variables. But more importantly, you should have Amaco gum solution on hand. And if you haven't used this, it is basically a binder that helps with keeping the brushing glaze or underglaze a good consistency, not only in order to be able to apply even coats, but it also helps with the adhesion to the bisqueware. And before I knew about it, even after I had started working at Amaco, I got my hands on some glazes, that partial jars that came back from a workshop, and I thought, ooh, I'm going to use these. And they were pretty thick, and I added a bunch of water and got them, you know, some of them were settled and I had to fight with them. But I finally got them to a consistency that was the right liquid consistency. I had trouble brushing them on because without the binder, they're too absorbed, they dry too quickly. So it's hard to get them on even, but that worked. And then I set them out to dry, and the next day they were all cracking and flaking off the piece. That's because I didn't use the gum solution. So I typed in Amaco gum solution. You can look that up on the Amaco website. It tells you, we have a video on how to use it, and there are proportions. The amount varies with how much glaze or product you have in the jar and how dried out it is, and also with the batch code. So the batch code is a number that's on the jars that tells you how old it is. And usually it ends in the year. So anything that ends in 20 or 21, you're probably okay without adding gum solution. But if it's older than that, you should be replenishing the gum. All right. Orange underglazes seem to go rancid. Yeah, you can add the bleach, and it has to do with the stain that's in those that just breaks down and grows bacteria. And the only way to counteract that is with a little bit of bleach, and it doesn't harm the product. It doesn't completely solve the problem or the issue, I should say. Ooh, I'm gonna stop sharing here. Now I realize I'm still sharing in case you want to see me bigger. So yeah, using a little bit of bleach is the best solution for that.
All right. Anyone else have any lingering questions that we want to ask Diana?
Yes, I had one, if I can ask.
Go for it.
You mentioned that, Danny, you mentioned the zinc-free clear glazes, and you kind of went over that, you just kind of mentioned it. And so I'm real curious. I'm firing cone 10, and a lot of there are glazes, clears that are zinc-free that I like to use, but I also have some that have zinc in them, and I'm just curious what your impression is of the impact that zinc is having on the Amaco underglazes, especially the velvets.
It just depends on the color, Bill. So the zinc can affect the greens. I believe it's the greens and the pinks. And that video that I referenced kind of explains that and shows you examples of what it can do to it. So it doesn't affect all the colors. And so that's why we offered 2 clear glazes in this HF series. So the HF9 is zinc free and the HF10 is not. And some people just prefer to use the HF9 for everything so they don't have to think about it. And the HF10 has a little bit, some people prefer the HF10 in terms of it, the translucency or the shine, like they just think it's a nicer clear, but it will, over certain underglaze colors, it will affect it and you'll get a different color. And by the way, I mentioned the Celadon series. The Celadon clear is also zinc free.
I
Thank
have
you.
one question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I saw one of your videos. I think one of your artists was doing on a satin white. She was doing some of the smugs, and she wasn't putting a gloss over it, so she said it wasn't food safe. But my question was, she mentioned that a few of the colors on the smugs, maybe it was mahogany, a green, and possibly maybe black bled a little. She at cone 5, and maybe it was one other color. So I'm wondering, because I don't want to, get a whole kit and then have it like 3 or 4 colors that fire rough at cone 5. Are you better off just maybe using the velvets and watering them down to get the same kind of effect as a smug if you fire at cone 5?
That would be a good way to approach it because we have more information on what the velvets will look like at cone 5 than we do on the smugs.
Okay.
So
They really formulated the smugs for the lower fire, it sounds like, even though she did some
well, yeah, both originally were only formulated for low fire, but we just have so many more people using the velvets at higher tones that we've created the chip charts and created the images and created the examples. So
okay.
yeah, and actually that leads me to the, and I just wanted, while I am thinking of it, to show you where to find that. So can you see the Amaco
Yes.
website? So I'm just going to click here on the new velvet underglaze because it'll take me straight there. But if it didn't, I would have gone to glazes and underglazes and then underglazes and then velvets. And so let's look for that white because V360 is the original Amaco white underglaze, not the ultra one that somebody asked about. So this shows what it looks like. Now it is, granted, it is kind of hard to see what it's doing, but we because it's white, I can't tell how smooth the surface is or anything like that, but you can see on the cone 10 it's starting to turn a little bit blue on my screen anyway. So we're showing you what all the colors look like. So to answer your question about whether you should stick with the velvets if you're only doing mid-range, I would say yes, because you can look at them and say, okay, what's this purple underglaze going to do? And you can come here if you don't have our print materials. Whoa, look at that. That's turning teal at cone 10,
Right.
So again, in some of the workshops that I've taught, I've had this question several times. People say, why is it
You
called
watching this?
I'm sorry? Somebody's asked me, why is it called purple? Because it looks blue. Well, they're not firing it at 05. It is purple at 05.
Right.
So this is all here and will be more predictable than the semi-moist.
Well,
So
I mean,
yeah, you can water down a little bit to get that wash effect to answer the other part of your question.
well, because that rabbit looked like it was done with the velvets, and that has a very similar effect what I was looking for with the smugs. But
Yeah.
so that answers that question. I guess I'm
Yeah.
going to stick with the smugs. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? While I'm here, I'll show you that resource tab. And if you go here to lesson plans, also there's a lot of stuff, a lot of different techniques, even if you're not working with kids that you might find interesting. Let me see if I can find that positive negative printing one. And if I can't find it, I usually put it in the search box. So let's do, because I know the name of it. Here it is. So positive, negative printing on clay. So that goes through the process of creating those stamps. And when we print on the clay, we use what we call ink, underglaze ink. And you may think, oh, she didn't show us this product, but it's actually just the same liquid underglaze that we let dry out. So that's another thing you can do with the underglazes if they're kind of dried out, is to use them for printing. So we actually evaporated it specifically for this project, like poured it out in a pan, but then you can print with it. Oh, let me show you the printing. So you ink the stamp. So it actually makes that sound like a printing ink. We're using a brayer and then loading the stamp from the brayer and then printing with it. So any other questions? Well, I wanted to show you where to find some of these projects.
Are you saying that when I get a rough surface after I've applied glaze, the underglaze, and then put clear over it, occasionally it's rough, especially the green for me, I'm just putting it on too thick? Is that what I heard you say?
You're putting the underglaze on top of the glaze?
No, it was under the glaze, under the clear.
And that's more likely that your clear wasn't thick enough, is my guess.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll check that.
Yeah. It could happen if the underglaze is super thick, but it would have to be way super thick. Yeah.
Yeah, Diane, I've experienced in using some of the underglazes, if they get on a little too heavy, they'll absorb a thin, to even,
yeah,
layer of glaze,
true.
they'll suck it right in there, and then you've got kind of a rough surface on parts.
Yeah, that's true. That can happen. But usually that can be resolved with more clear glaze, maybe not exclusively.
Yeah.
Just went to the layering tab there. I see a question about about coupon codes for ordering from the Amaco website, and we don't discount to consumers because we want to support our distributors, our network of distributors. So as a manufacturing company, we rely heavily on all the pottery supply companies that you all purchase from, and we don't want to undercut them, basically. So thanks for asking. But if you order it from our website, it will usually be fulfilled by one of our distributors that has it in stock. So, thank you. I had a couple of kind emails. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and thank you for watching and for the great questions. I'll take one more before I say goodnight, if anybody else.
Well, Diane, on behalf of the Guild, I want to thank you for making the time in your life and in your evening to join us and to share your knowledge and expertise with us. I think it's been great. We've had a record-breaking number of members attend the meeting tonight. So
wonderful.
Thank you very much. And hopefully people will take advantage of using the resources you've identified or contacting you directly. And we'll make sure that information gets posted with this video.
Thank you very much for coming. And yeah, feel free to email me and use the resources, as Barbara said, and have a great evening, everyone.
All right.
Well done.
I'm going to turn the back over to Win.
Thanks, Diane.
Thank